Most parents believe the hardest part of raising a child is doing something wrong. But that's not the real danger. The real danger is doing everything right. Buying the products everyone recommends, following advice that sounds logical, trusting tools that promise safety, intelligence, and faster development. And quietly, without any alarms, without any obvious warning signs, those same tools begin to reshape how a child's body moves, how their brain wires itself, and how they relate to the people closest to them. Not because parents are careless, not because they don't love their children enough, but because nobody tells them what these products actually do beneath the surface. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if some of the most popular baby products in America aren't helping children grow, but subtly training them to rely on external systems instead of their own bodies, their own curiosity, and their own internal regulation? What if the same shortcuts we use to make parenting easier today are quietly borrowing from our children's future resilience, focus, and independence? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't feel guilty. You won't feel defensive. But you will see your child's environment and your role in it very differently. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. And awareness is power. Let's start with something that feels harmless, even helpful. A product that's been in American homes for decades. Something often passed down, gifted, or stored in basements and garages just in case. Baby walkers. At first glance, they seem brilliant. Your baby can move, you get your hands free. Everyone's happier. Except the science tells a very different story. In controlled studies comparing infants who used baby walkers with those who didn't, the results were consistent and deeply unsettling. Babies who used walkers learned to walk later, often 3 to 4 weeks later, than babies who never touched one. They also scored lower on standardized developmental assessments months later. But timing isn't the real issue. The real issue is what walkers teach the nervous system. When a baby learns to walk naturally, they do it through instability. They wobble, they fall, they push, adjust, recalibrate. Each near fall is data. Each recovery is a neurological upgrade. The cerebellum, responsible for balance, coordination, and predictive movement, is learning in real time. But a walker removes all of that. No balance required, no core engagement, no problem solving. Instead of learning how to shift weight and stabilize through the hips, babies learn to push off their toes and glide. It's not walking, it's an entirely different motor pattern, and the brain records it. Now layer in safety. Walkers give babies mobility before they have judgment. Suddenly, an 8-month-old can reach stairs, ovens, cords, and coffee tables at speed. This is why the American Academy of Pediatrics didn't issue a warning. They called for a complete ban, not regulation, not redesign, a ban. And yet, walkers are still sold, still gifted, still marketed as developmental tools. Because they solve a short-term problem for parents, hands-free time, while creating a long-term cost for children. So what actually helps? The most unglamorous answer possible. Floor time. Struggle. Holding your child's hands while they take uneven steps. Push toys that move slowly and demand effort. Letting development happen when the body is ready, not when a product allows it. Which brings us to the next item. Bumbo seats and early sit-up chairs. They look supportive. They look safe. They look like they're helping babies practice sitting. But sitting isn't a skill you practice. It's a milestone that emerges. It grows from the inside out. Babies develop sitting by strengthening deep core muscles through rolling, pushing up during tummy time, and transitioning through side-sitting positions. When we prop babies into upright positions before they can get there themselves, we bypass that entire process. We place load on a spine that isn't stabilized yet. We remove the necessity for muscular engagement. It's the developmental equivalent of putting someone in a cast and expecting them to get stronger. The body adapts to what it's asked to do. And when it isn't asked to stabilize itself, it doesn't. The result isn't dramatic failure. It's subtle delay, poor trunk control, reduced postural endurance, less efficient movement patterns later. And again, parents don't see this happening because the baby looks fine. Until months later, when coordination feels off or fatigue sets in faster than expected. The fix is simple, but emotionally harder. Let babies struggle on the floor. Let them wobble. Let them tip over. That instability is the workout, and the body will rise to meet it. Now, everything we've discussed so far affects physical development. But the next category reaches deeper. It reshapes how the brain learns to pay attention, interpret language, and engage socially. Screens, educational videos, baby apps. This is where emotions run high. So let's ground this in evidence. For children under 2, screens do not teach language. They delay it. Even when the content is labeled educational, even when it's interactive, even when babies appear focused. Because attention is not learning. A screen captures attention through novelty, bright colors, rapid cuts, exaggerated motion. But learning requires interaction. Babies learn language through contingency. They babble. You respond. They adjust. That back and forth is how neural circuits form. A video can't respond to your child's specific sounds in real time. It can't read facial expressions. It can't adjust timing based on confusion, excitement, or curiosity. And there's another effect most parents don't consider. High-intensity stimulation recalibrates expectations. Real life becomes slower, quieter, less engaging by comparison, which makes it harder for babies to sustain attention during normal human interaction, the exact environment where learning actually happens. This doesn't mean screens are poison. It means their opportunity cost. Every minute in front of a screen is a minute not spent in responsive interaction. And the difference compounds. A caregiver narrating their day, responding to gestures, making eye contact. This builds not just vocabulary, but emotional intelligence and social timing. If you need a break, and you do, a safe play space with simple toys does far more good than a screen ever could. Even frustration is productive. It teaches self-directed attention. Which brings us to toys. Specifically, toys that light up, sing, talk, and perform. They seem engaging, but engagement isn't the same as agency. When a toy does everything, the child does nothing. The toy dictates the play. The child watches. Compare that to a cardboard box, blocks, a wooden spoon and a pot. Suddenly the child invents. They decide. They problem solve. That's executive function. That's creativity. That's the foundation of future learning. And interestingly, children often choose these simple objects when given the option, not because they're boring, but because they demand participation. Now let's talk about something more serious. Something that isn't just developmentally concerning, but potentially dangerous. Infant sleep positioners and cushioned sleep pods. They're marketed as safer, as more comfortable, as solutions to reflux and restlessness. But medical organizations are clear. Babies should sleep on a firm, flat surface with nothing else in the crib. No cushions, no pods, no positioners. Because soft surfaces restrict movement and increase suffocation risk. But there's also a developmental cost. On firm surfaces, babies move during sleep. They turn their heads, shift weight, strengthen muscles. Cushioned environments restrict this. They reduce sensory input. They create monotony where exploration should exist. A bare crib may look stark, but it supports both safety and development. Now let's talk about motion devices. Swings, rockers, vibrating seats. They work. That's the problem. They replace attunement. When parents soothe babies manually, both sides learn. Parents learn cries. Babies learn regulation. Mechanical soothing removes that feedback loop. And babies adapt. They become dependent on external motion. Human soothing is irregular. Breathing changes. Movement varies. That variability teaches self-regulation. Machines don't. Used occasionally, they're fine. Used as primary soothing tools, they create long-term reliance. The alternative is harder, but permanent. Human presence. Skin-to-skin contact. Routine. Consistency. Now, there's one last category, and it's sitting in your diaper bag. Food pouches. They're convenient, clean, efficient. And when they become the primary feeding method, they quietly erase crucial learning. Eating is not just nutrition. It's motor development, sensory exploration, confidence building. Grasping food builds fine motor control. Chewing strengthens oral muscles for speech. Mess teaches cause and effect. Pouches bypass all of it. Food becomes passive, uniform, effortless. And effort is how skill develops. Mess is not failure. It's data. It's learning. It's progress. And here's the bigger picture. Every product we discussed is recent. For most of human history, none of them existed. Children developed just fine. So why do we believe we need them now? Because the baby industry is enormous, and it sells convenience by borrowing from development. The costs are subtle, invisible, until suddenly milestones lag, confidence wavers, and parents wonder what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. The system just optimized for ease instead of growth. So here's the only question that matters. Is this product doing something my child should be learning to do themselves? Ask that, and everything changes. If there's one idea that quietly shapes modern parenting more than any other, it's this. Faster is better. Earlier milestones, smarter babies, less struggle, more efficiency. We've been taught, subtly, persistently, that development is something you can optimize if you buy the right tools, follow the right hacks, and remove enough friction. But real development doesn't happen in smooth lines. It happens in resistance. And this is where many well-intentioned parents get trapped, because friction feels like failure. A baby who struggles to sit feels behind. A toddler who gets frustrated feels uncomfortable. A child who moves slowly feels inefficient. So we intervene. We prompt. We distract. We outsource. And every time we do, the child learns something, not consciously, but neurologically. They learn that effort isn't required. That regulation comes from outside. That discomfort is something to escape, not work through. These lessons don't show up on a developmental chart. They show up years later, in attention, in persistence, in confidence. This is where parenting quietly intersects with the same principles that govern investing, business, and long-term wealth creation. Short-term comfort versus long-term compounding. In finance, we understand this intuitively. Remove volatility, and you remove growth. Avoid risk entirely, and you avoid upside. Chase convenience, and you pay with fragility. Children are no different. Their nervous systems compound based on what they're exposed to and what they're protected from. When a baby struggles to reach a toy on the floor, their brain is learning cause and effect. When a toddler tries and fails to stack blocks, they're learning prediction, adjustment, and resilience. When we remove those moments, we don't just remove frustration, we remove learning. This is why many of the most advanced products quietly delay independence. They perform instead of demanding participation. They soothe instead of teaching regulation. They entertain instead of inviting curiosity. And curiosity is the engine of intelligence. Let's talk about attention, because attention is the currency of learning, and it's being rewired earlier than most parents realize. When children are exposed to constant stimulation, screens, flashing toys, rapid feedback, their brains adapt. They expect novelty. They expect speed. They expect reward without effort. This isn't a moral failure. It's biology. The brain wires itself around the environment it's given, which means when that environment later becomes quieter, classrooms, conversations, reading, attention feels expensive. Sustaining focus feels uncomfortable, and discomfort is something they were trained to avoid. This is why educators across the US are reporting the same trend. Children who are bright, capable, and curious, but unable to sit with boredom, ambiguity, or delayed reward. Those capacities aren't innate. They're trained. Slowly, through unstructured play, through waiting, through moments where nothing happens and the child has to generate something internally. Now let's zoom out, because none of this exists in isolation. Every product we've discussed reinforces a single narrative, that development is something done to a child, instead of something that emerges through them. This mindset changes how parents see their role. Parents become managers, optimizers, risk reducers. But the most powerful role a parent can play is something far less visible. Architect. Architects don't perform the building. They design the environment. They decide what's possible, and what's not. They remove hazards. They don't remove challenge. Because challenge is what gives structure meaning. The most resilient children aren't the ones with the most tools. They're the ones with environments that invite effort and connection. And connection is the other half of this equation. Because development isn't just physical or cognitive. It's relational. Every time a parent responds to a baby's cue, a bond strengthens. Every time a toddler looks to a caregiver after falling and receives calm reassurance, their nervous system learns safety. But when products replace interaction, something subtle shifts. The baby learns to self-soothe through objects, not people. The toddler learns that comfort comes from devices, not relationships. This doesn't break attachment, but it thins it. And attachment is the foundation for exploration. A child who feels securely connected is more willing to take risks, more willing to try, more willing to fail. Which is why independence doesn't come from pushing children away. It comes from being consistently available. This is where modern parenting gets paradoxical. We try to create independence by removing dependence, but true independence grows from secure dependence first. Children don't need to be taught confidence. They need to experience themselves succeeding at hard things, with support nearby. Now, let's address the unspoken fear many parents carry. What if I'm already too late? You're not. Development is remarkably forgiving. Brains are plastic. Bodies adapt. What matters most is not perfection, it's direction. Every time you choose floor play over containment, conversation over distraction, presence over performance, you're shifting the trajectory, and trajectories compound. This is also where guilt becomes useless. Guilt frees us. Awareness empowers. You don't need to throw everything away. You don't need to undo the past. You need to see clearly and choose intentionally. The baby product industry thrives on anxiety. It sells certainty in a domain where none exists, and certainty feels comforting. But growth lives in uncertainty. It always has. Let's talk about one more invisible cost: parental confidence. When products promise outcomes, better sleep, faster milestones, smarter babies, and don't deliver, parents internalize the failure. They assume they're doing something wrong, instead of questioning the promise. This erodes intuition. Parents stop trusting their instincts. They defer to packaging, marketing copy, online reviews. But no product knows your child, and no product can replace attuned observation. The most powerful data source you have is in front of you: your child's responses, their rhythms, their cues. And when parents reconnect with that, something shifts. They become less reactive, less anxious, more present, which benefits the child more than any object ever could. Now let's zoom forward in time. Imagine your child at 7, or 12, or 20. The traits that will matter most won't be whether they walked early, or spoke early, or slept through the night. They'll be: can they focus? Can they persist through difficulty? Can they regulate emotion? Can they relate to others? Can they sit with uncertainty? Those traits are built now, quietly, daily, through thousands of small interactions and thousands of small non-interactions. So here's a reframe that changes everything. Instead of asking, "Is this making my life easier?" ask, "What skill is this replacing?" Sometimes replacement is fine. Sometimes it's not. But awareness turns passive consumption into intentional choice. And intentional choice is what great parenting is made of. You don't need more stuff. You need fewer barriers between your child and the world, between your child and you. Let them move. Let them struggle. Let them get bored. Let them get messy. And let them see you, not a device, responding when it matters. Because what children remember isn't the product, it's the presence. There's a moment in every long-term investment when nothing seems to be happening. The numbers don't move. The progress isn't visible. Doubt creeps in. And that's usually the moment when impatient investors exit. Parenting works the same way. Much of what matters most in a child's development is invisible while it's happening. You don't see neural pathways forming. You don't feel executive function strengthening. You don't notice emotional regulation wiring itself together. You only see the absence of obvious results. And in that absence, it's tempting to intervene, to accelerate, to enhance, to optimize. But the most valuable outcomes, resilience, adaptability, self-trust, are delayed returns. They don't reward impatience. They compound quietly. This is why so many of the tools marketed to parents fail at the exact thing they promise. They create the illusion of progress. But illusion doesn't compound. Effort does. Struggle does. Connection does. Let's talk about independence, because independence is often misunderstood. Many parents believe independence means a child needing less from them. In reality, independence means a child trusting themselves. And self-trust doesn't come from being managed. It comes from agency. From trying, failing, adjusting, and trying again. When a child learns to soothe themselves with a screen, a device, or a product, they're not learning independence. They're learning substitution. When a child learns to soothe themselves through internal regulation, breathing, movement, connection, they're learning mastery. That distinction matters because mastery scales, substitution does not. Now imagine two children, both loved, both cared for, both provided for. One grows up in an environment where discomfort is minimized at all costs. The other grows up in an environment where discomfort is supported, but not erased. Fast forward 20 years. One avoids challenge. The other engages it. One looks for external validation. The other trusts internal feedback. One needs constant stimulation. The other can sit with silence. These differences don't come from genetics. They come from early environments. And again, this isn't about blame. It's about leverage. Because early childhood is one of the highest leverage periods in human development. Small inputs create outsized effects. Which is why awareness now matters more than perfection ever could. Let's address something few people say out loud. Modern parents are exhausted, not just physically, cognitively, emotionally. The sheer volume of advice, products, and opinions creates constant low-grade anxiety. Am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Am I missing something critical? Industries thrive on that uncertainty. They monetize it. But the truth is both simpler and harder. Children don't need optimized environments. They need responsive ones. They need adults who notice, who adapt, who stay present even when it's boring. Especially when it's boring. Because boredom is not emptiness. It's the space where imagination begins. It's where internal narratives form. It's where creativity emerges. When boredom is immediately filled, creativity never gets invited. Now, let's talk directly to you, not as a parent, as a human. You were once a child too. You learned through play, through mistakes, through friction. Think back to the moments that shaped you. They probably weren't the moments when everything was easy. They were the moments when you struggled and figured it out, or when someone stayed with you while you struggled. That's the model, and it hasn't changed. Technology has, marketing has, expectations have, but biology hasn't. Human development still follows the same rules it always has. Connection before independence. Movement before mastery. Effort before competence. So here's the quiet truth behind everything we've talked about. Parenting isn't about doing more. It's about interfering less. Not neglect, not absence, but restraint. Knowing when to step back, knowing when to let the process work, and trusting that slow doesn't mean broken. It means building. Now, before we reach the end, there's something important to say. If this video has resonated with you, if it's shifted how you think about products, parenting, or development, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Not because of algorithms, but because the conversations we're having here are rare and they matter. And if you know one person, a friend, a partner, a sibling, who genuinely wants a better relationship with their child, someone who cares deeply and tries hard, share this video with them. Not to criticize, not to correct, but to support. Because parenting isn't meant to be done alone. And clarity is something we can give each other. Now let's bring this home. The goal isn't to raise perfect children. There is no such thing. The goal is to raise capable humans. Humans who trust themselves, who can regulate their emotions, who can engage with the world instead of retreating from it. And that begins in the most ordinary moments, on the floor, at the table, during quiet play, in conversation, without gadgets doing the work for them, without products replacing connection. You don't need to be extraordinary. You need to be present. You don't need to buy better tools. You need to trust better instincts. And when you do, something remarkable happens. Children rise, not because they're pushed, but because the environment finally allows them to. Let development unfold. It knows what it's doing. There's a quiet relief that comes when you finally stop trying to win at parenting, when you stop measuring progress by milestones, gear, and comparisons, when you realize that childhood was never meant to be efficient. It was meant to be formative. The pressure to optimize children often comes from love, but love mixed with fear. Fear of falling behind, fear of missing something critical, fear of not being enough. But children don't need parents who are always right. They need parents who are real, parents who notice, parents who listen, parents who stay. Development doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for consistency. It asks for environments where effort is allowed, where failure isn't rushed away, and where connection is stronger than convenience. When you remove the noise, when you strip parenting down to its essentials, you're left with something surprisingly simple. Time, space, attention. A child on the floor, figuring out their body. A child at the table, exploring food with their hands. A child in quiet play, inventing meaning from nothing. These moments don't look impressive. They don't photograph well. They don't sell products. But they build humans. Strong ones. Adaptable ones. Humans who can think independently, regulate their emotions, and engage deeply with the world. And here's the part that often goes unnoticed. When you stop outsourcing development to products, something else happens. You slow down too. You become less reactive, less anxious, more grounded. Parenting becomes less about control and more about relationship. And relationships are where growth actually happens. Not just for children, for adults too. You don't need to fear getting it wrong. Children are resilient. What they need most isn't a perfect setup. It's a safe base. A place they can return to after falling. A person who sees them. A presence that doesn't disappear when things get hard. That's not something you can buy, and it's not something you can automate. It's something you choose, again and again, in small, ordinary moments. So if you take nothing else from this video, take this. Trust the process. Trust your child's body. Trust your relationship. And trust that the slow path, the one that looks messy, inefficient, and unremarkable from the outside, is often the one that leads to the strongest outcomes. Not just in childhood, but in life.